Well, hello, everyone. Thanks for joining today and welcome to Rethinking Receivables. So today's topic is going to be about improving your customer's experience. And this is actually part of a series. So it's a three-part series. For those of you that attended or those that didn't, on the last discussion, we spent time talking about risk-based collections, taking a risk-based approach and using risk information, both information that you have and information you can gather from other providers to build a risk-based strategy around collections. And so today we're really digging down and drilling into that customer experience across order to cash. And in a lot of ways, that improved customer experience is really taking it and making it a digital experience. So we'll talk about after some introductions, that digital experience. We'll go through the workflow and the steps in the process for order to cash, and then where there's opportunities to digitize and improve that experience, and just some of the best practices that we're seeing in the space. And then we'll show you some tools that we use to actually put these ideas and put these best practices into practice. And goal is to leave about 10 to 15 minutes at the end for Q&A. However, you'll see there's a Q&A box. So, throughout the session, just please add questions as they come up. And then toward the end, we'll go ahead and we'll answer those live on the call. So just for a quick introduction, so I'm Ryan Camlin, and I'll be your moderator today. I'm a Senior Director of Product Management at Dun Bradstreet, responsible for the Receivables Intelligence product, both the strategic direction, the product roadmap. Been with DNB, it's actually now more than 5 years, but yes, more than 5 years in a variety of roles throughout the company. I also have Chris Rios with me today, and Chris is our Vice President of DNB Finance Analytics. He brings a wealth of experience within finance operations, so more than 20 years, both directly working in credit collections and finance operations, leading teams, and leading digital transformation within an organization. So, we're gonna be here today to kind of talk you through what we're seeing in the market, some of the best practices, and then how you can potentially put that into place within your own organization. So, with that, let's start to dive in here, and we'll start with a couple of processes. And so, when you think about improving your customer experience and digitizing AR, there is a large demand that is coming even from finance departments. And so you see this kind of big stat here: 67% of companies say they want to innovate their AR systems, and they want to do this to actually improve the customer experience, because things like receiving a digital invoice, I mean, not only does it reduce paper and postage on your end, but it has potential to simplify the process for your own customers. Even things like being able to make digital payments, and for customers to receive payment reminders via email. I mean, we're all busy, and so it's easy to forget or lose track. And so having a system in place that can send out some automated emails, it really helps. Especially if you can attach the invoice. It's a big question. Did I even receive the invoice, right? So Chris, just to kind of give us a little bit of history, you've done this a couple of times in some fairly large organizations, and how did you engage in your digital journey in your previous roles?
Yeah, and good afternoon to everyone who's able to join today. We appreciate the opportunity to speak with you. Ryan, I think what it really comes down to, you hear the term digitalization or digitizing your AR process, big fancy term. It's being utilized a lot in the market. I think starting simple is the best approach. Take a look at your portfolio, take a look at how it's segmented, start to focus on areas where there's a higher propensity for your lower risk accounts, your low risk customers, maybe those that don't have a high amount of receivables outstanding with you, to really get them to embrace this idea of moving from what I've been calling conventional transactional workflow, snail mail, check processing, et cetera, to this digital experience, which really starts with what you alluded to, and it's just simply presenting information to your customers in an electronic way. And for me, it always started with email. As we move up that maturity scale, and many of you on the call today probably deal with this regularly. But then when we move away from simply emailing PDF documents and statements, et cetera, we start to look at the direct integration with third-party payable platforms. And so that's really where we start to see the sort of that walk up that maturity curve. But keeping it simple initially, introducing your customers to the benefits of obtaining their documentation electronically, I think has always been the most successful approach. This is a time investment for both you and your customers. So you don't want to set yourself up for failure. You want this to be a journey that you're bringing your customers on, but also explain and show them what the benefits are to them. The initial impression may be that you simply just want your money sooner, faster, accelerate cash. But the reality is there's operational benefits for both parties when we think about the costs associated with conventional transactional management.
Yeah, and we're going to go into each of these areas in more in depth in the as part of this discussion, but want to kind of cover everything from pre-sales into credit management and then down into collections and payments, and where there's opportunity to improve the customer experience and improve those customer touch points, kind of outside, Chris, of what we showed here. When thinking about the order to cash experience, what other considerations should organizations be reviewing? Things like billing errors, cash application challenges. What other areas should they be looking at?
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit on them. In my experience, I found that some of the biggest contributors to DSO deterioration almost had nothing to do with financial distress within the portfolio. I think those of us who have been involved in risk management, credit collections, and related areas, it's not difficult to see where the financially distressed accounts are or what behaviors they're exhibiting. But what becomes a little challenging, and this speaks to credit and collections sometimes becoming a bit of a dumping ground, for lack of a better term, for issues that arise throughout the credit to cash ecosystem. And billing is one area I know for two of the last several organizations I worked for. A tremendous amount of billing errors on the front end created a lot of disputes, contributed to slow pay and no pay scenarios. It was at one organization to the point that we saw anywhere between a 3 and 5 day deterioration of DSO. So, the focus for me became, how do I address the root cause of these issues and really start resolving those billing errors? And over time, we found that, once you start resolving those issues, payments are more forthcoming. On the back end of this is, I've had two organizations I worked for where we didn't have a hard time getting money into our lockbox. The challenge was getting the money applied. Lack of remittance detail, decoupled remittance, payments being sent to branch locations and not directly to the lockbox. I mean, these things, while the money's in the bank, not getting it offset against the open receivables, at least in my anecdotal scenario, we saw about a 1 to 3 day deterioration. So, we think about order to cash, and it's easy to focus on credit decisioning, collection efficiency, but really we've got to start getting, I would say, aggregate the learnings of what we're hearing through the dispute management process, deductions management process, and really start to push that information back out to the other operational owners that are part of the end-to-end credit to cash process, and hold them accountable for resolving issues more so at the root cause.
Yeah, and so what we're going to jump to now is just a quick poll question here. Curious as to when you think about the customer touch points that you have through your order to cash process, what percent of your customer touch points would you say are digital? Is it less than 25, less than half, more than that? So we'll let those results come in here and kind of see where folks are at.
Yeah, I guess, Ryan, I would say, we'll see the results, but as we think of digital, it's really where am I eliminating the manual touch points? So whatever you define digital as, we always look at it from the perspective of the least amount of manual touch points I need to have with my customers, suppliers, et cetera. That's really, where we're focused on this digital experience and transformation. And
Yeah.
so the percentages are coming in here, and look, it's encouraging and refreshing. We've got some pretty high percentages. 26% or feel that they're in that 50 to 75% range. Not surprising. Looks like a fairly even distribution if we look across the various selections. And I think it's a journey. So you're better served as a business to be deliberate in how you want to approach this digital transformation. I was giving a webinar the other day and a question came in, how long should we expect this process to take? I'll be honest. I mean, in my experience, it's probably a 3-year exercise. Now, some businesses can accelerate that, but again, don't set yourself up for any immediate failure. I think year one is identifying where you are on that maturity spectrum. Year two is implementing and enabling and encouraging change and increasing the adoption around the digital experience. And by the time you get to year three, you hope to have had a year's worth of operational activity that you can look back on and start to measure your success against. So I chunk these things up into these increments of 1, 2, and 3, and would encourage all of our clients or any business who was asking to think about it in the same manner.
Yeah, it's a good point in terms of how to actually drive this change in the organization. It's very difficult to change everything all at once, especially when the car is moving down the road, right? To use that old kind of a saying. So I know from my perspective, where we've seen success with customers and where they've been able to succeed is attacking this in phases. So there's going to be certain parts of this journey that you're going to be able to digitize before others. And then that's where you get into that kind of longer to medium term view of a multi-year journey. So we'll talk about the pre-sales process. I mean, I think e-signatures, they've been around for a long time, kind of table stakes at this point, but the idea that, that signature, that contracting process is done in a digital manner. I know an area that we continue to see a lot of interest and companies looking to attack is around their customer data management. Even in their upfront, whether that's their prospects or when they're initially creating that customer in their CRM, we hear lots of challenges on duplicate account records, accounts with missing information, and if you think about the downstream impact of that on things that Chris was hitting on in terms of just the billing errors or remittance, and so having that, I think companies are starting to see the importance of having that clean customer master data up front. And then the other trend is around pre-qualification. So actually doing some level of a screen on a prospect list, more than just kind of name, address, email, phone number, but can you understand the risk of your prospect pool before you even approach them with an offer, and can you focus on the companies that are would be not denied credit, right? So why go and why spend marketing dollars on a company that you may end up denying credit terms or even working with down the road? So Chris, kind of anything to add there as it relates to customer data management and maintenance in the pre-sales process?
Yeah, I mean, I think, the idea of pre-screening has been around for a little while, and I know we here at D&B have promoted that quite a bit over the last several years. I think what I would say is we should all appreciate the fact that, at least in my days of running finance ops groups, I never had the luxury and autonomy to simply say no to a deal, right? So, when we think about this customer data management pre-qualification, I say we've got to open the box a little bit, and by that I mean you want to ensure that you're not just doing these pre-qualifications, but actually considering what are the risk attributes that I want to append to my customer record to have that information accompany the customer through its life cycle. So you can append a number of risk attributes that will facilitate better monitoring, maintenance, and alert services around your customer record. Unique identifiers will bridge the gap between what I imagine are plenty of disparate systems that contain customer data throughout your technology ecosystem. And when we think about this pre-qualification process, I'll tell you with the current environment, still businesses working through COVID. We've been getting questions more about things that you may find on supplier onboarding, risk mitigation, but now we're finding there's an overlap of what a customer onboarding experience is like and what a supplier onboarding experience is like. And what it comes down to is business validation and verification. And so, where you have an opportunity, consider alternative or other sources of risk information. I think at this point in time, it behooves all businesses to consider all the information that's in the marketplace to start to formulate a profile of a business, not just a risk or a financial profile, but an overall business profile that's all encompassing. And that's definitely something that I've gotten more questions about, I'd say, really over the last 6 months.
Yep. And on the order management piece, one is going to be just having a communication process that's digital where your customer is aware of what's happening, where they are within the fulfillment process, the ability to order online. I think another interesting trend that we're seeing in the e-commerce space is the ability to really pay on terms through an e-commerce journey. I think, historically, a lot of the B2B e-commerce had been credit card driven or pay upfront driven. But more and more you're seeing the pay on terms. I think Amazon's an interesting example where a buyer can go to the Amazon marketplace. They actually have a solution for pay on terms through that marketplace, and a buyer is able to get instant approval online. And I think that's starting to become, in some ways, the expectation for how they're transacting online. I mean, Chris, kind of from what you've seen, are you seeing more of a move toward this e-commerce type model? And is it certain industries where you're seeing this, or is it more broad across all businesses?
Yeah, to be perfectly honest, I don't know that I'm seeing any more or less of an interest. I think what comes to mind when we talk about the e-commerce and pay on terms is alternative means of financing, whether it be, a supplier looking to accelerate its cash. So they offer these alternative uh, supplier type financing alternatives, or if it's a buyer looking to take advantage of float, but still ensure that its suppliers are paid. So what's interesting is that I think we're going to start to see the emergence of alternative payment options, whether it's supply
Mhm.
side financing, buyer side financing. There's become a more interest in how do I how do I finance my purchases, but how do I also, as a supplier, ensure that I'm not, subject to cash deterioration and working capital impact. And, I think that that's really what's going to become most prevalent when we think about e-commerce and pay on terms. Because look, and this is certainly not to diminish the value of the credit function. I think there is a compliance, governance, a control requirement that it brings to the table. But I think, if trade credit were to go away tomorrow, businesses still need to interact on open credit terms. And in doing so, what becomes more important is the ability for you as a business to manage your portfolio and really understand the behaviors of your customers within segments of the portfolio and take the appropriate actions. And sometimes those actions are being in a position to provide alternative payment options to your customer base. And likewise, you're going to see, and it's increased over the last few years, but you see businesses, your customers, putting the administrative burden on you for having to interact with third party portals and other third party technology that really that's what they're doing. They're shifting that burden to their suppliers. In turn, there's time to money lost. And so all of these things are going to lead to both sides of the equation thinking about, how do I ensure I'm getting paid and accelerating cash? And as a buyer, how am I ensuring that I get to sit on my money a little longer, but still ensure that I'm not creating angst within my relationships as a business. So a little left to right there, Ryan, but I think certainly the Amazon experience, the Walmart experience, the Target experience, and with COVID, there's an emergence of more online activity. But I think what it's going to lead to, is particularly on the pay on terms aspect of e-commerce, is what are my alternatives so that I can continue to be part of this, global value chain, and not, put too much stress on my suppliers or put the burden on my customers to have to pay me, in net 30, because, the trends are continuously shifting based on, macro events that are happening in the world today.
Yes. And then, looking into the credit management piece here, and these are, once again, things that D&B has been talking about for some time, right? The first one here is just having an online credit application. So the ability to present your customer with a link they can click to and then fill out a form online rather than having to fill up a paper form. And then on that credit application, you're capturing all the information that your team and you're going to need to make a decision. Because that is that expectation of, how do you get a fast decision, whether that's from a customer perspective or even from a sales perspective. It's really about speed, especially in that selling process, and then using data to drive the terms that you're presenting, whether that's going to be asking for cash up front or actually extending terms. And then, what terms are you extending, and doing that in a way that that there's some, variance within those terms based on the data. So, and Chris, you've actually put in an OCA process at an organization you work for. So interested to kind of hear your experience in having done that, and going from not having one to actually having one in place.
Yeah, started. So the organization I was with prior to joining D&B back in 2019, we didn't have a process in place, and so we relied on our branches and our field reps to submit applications. These were manual applications. A lot of times we were getting them after the fact. We had introduced Salesforce.com as our CRM. We had very low adoption rate in the field, and so the online credit application process basically allowed us to say, look, at the end of the day, it's a business decision. If we've done our due diligence, if we've created a model that incorporates all of the risk attributes that we feel appropriate, all of the historical receivables information based on relationships, and we formulated a model that results in an outcome that's a fail, at that point, it becomes a business decision. So rather than have credit or collections groups become a barrier, we simply put the responsibility back on the business to say, the model works, we proved it out, you've got to make the business decision. We're telling you it's not a good risk, but inevitably someone, and we've all been the recipient of the back and forth emails and the threatening escalation emails that say, well, I'm going to go to your boss, I'm going to go to the CFO, that's fine. That's all within the business's right to make those decisions. We're here as a point of information, we being credit collections, and let the business make the decision. So the benefit that I found was that we took down the barrier, we created an efficiency, and we put accountability back on the business. We tracked what they sold after we said, this is not a good opportunity. So if they did make a sale, we were there not to just call them out or to point fingers, but rather to say, look, we're going to just continue down this path. And over time, we proved that the model works, the decisioning was accurate, and we started to see our regional controllers implement changes to policy, and we started to have revenue deferrals. We had commissions impacted. If you want to take on this risk that your risk management team has said is not good, that's on you as a business owner. And over time, what we found is it initiated the behavioral change that we were never going to get to simply going back and forth over email or the arguing over phone calls as to why I believe this is not good, why I believe this is good. They've been a client for 20 years. Why all of a sudden can't we sell them? It's that minutia and administrative nonsense, in my opinion, that really takes valuable time away from, and I have an affinity for the credit collections receivable management function, but it's just such a labor intensive back and forth that takes valuable time away from doing real analysis, doing the value added activities like reconciling accounts, resolving disputes, better management around deductions, the things that will yield you increased cash flow, reduced DSO. So don't think about it necessarily as eliminating a key compliance or governance checkpoint because you're automating credit. Think about the time that will be freed up so long as you make the upfront investment in creating a model that's based on best demonstrated practices. And it's not limited to just, hey, D&B data is the end all be all. It's the combination of third party data with the historical behaviors and activities of your portfolio that should inform how you implement the right model. And the OCA is just a mechanism. It's an automated mechanism for ensuring that the paper chase that happens typically is resolved sooner than later.
Yep. And just going into the invoicing side, it's you'll see a few points here uh, where e-invoicing kind of, once again, that's been out there for a while now. You're seeing many companies have adopted, at least for in large part, have moved from print and mail to e-invoicing, at least for many parts of their business. Where we are seeing kind of the market moving is around adoption of customer portals. So in addition to sending that digital invoice, it's having a link within that invoice where your customer can go register for a portal, and then through that portal they're going to be able to see their invoices and make payments. And it's going to avoid them having to cut a check, send it to a bank, or go somewhere else to make a payment. They can see that link right there with the invoice or in that reminder email, and then go in and make a payment. And then one of the other things that we're seeing too is, even in some cases where maybe you would have had to do, let's say, a cash up front or take payment up front, you can capture the credit card or the bank information to make a payment if an invoice goes past due. So you're still extending terms, but you're getting the information to actually capture and make a payment in case there is some issue, right? So it's in a way it's like getting cash up front, but you're still able to extend terms. So Chris, what are you seeing in terms of some of the challenges of kind of moving to an EIPP process? And were there certain things that you did to help to kind of drive adoption and enablement across the customer base?
Yeah, I mean, this is really getting at the heart of the digital experience. This is really at the core of the transformation from conventional to digital, and not an easy undertaking, as I made mention of. My 3 year sort of framework that I mentioned a little while ago. I think you want to start with if you think about, I'm going to oversimplify this, but a high, medium, low risk portfolio segmentation, certainly those lower risk accounts, those that would rather not be bothered with a phone call or a collection email, et cetera. Starting there, initiating this idea of transformation through communications. We've seen, some companies hire enablement teams. They build out these huge organizations that are tasked with calling their entire customer base to try to get them to convert to this digital model. I'd say that's not necessary, right? Start simple. Again, look at your low risk accounts, engage them. You may be sending friendly reminder notices today. The ability to maybe embed another message in that communication that highlights you're now looking to move towards a digital model. You start to sprinkle rather than pepper in. You sprinkle in the idea of self-service. Those low risk, low dollar accounts are more likely to want to adopt a self-service experience where they can actively go out and retrieve information, pull down their own invoice copies, initiate payment as you described, Ryan. And over time, you measure the adoption rate of those customers. But to effectuate change with the medium and high risk accounts, that becomes a combination of the collection process and the calls and electronic communications. And one of the things that, and I think you'll attest to this as well, Ryan, because you're on customer calls like I am, this idea of being able to provide a secure link to a portal. So, for example, if we have a medium or high risk account, I'm not saying you should defer to an email notification. I'd say a combination of strategies is important, but one of those strategic touch points could be an email notification notifying your customer that they're delinquent, but embedded in the body of that communication, a link to a portal, a secure link that starts to help them move closer to that digital experience. Because quite honestly, as a former, procurement lead, I also didn't like to get emails about what invoices were passed through. It was bothersome, but bothersome to a point that I knew who was going to be chasing me for payment, so I just wanted to make the payment. Again, it's a matter of initiating this idea first, but then how do you facilitate the transformation? One, start presenting invoices electronically, whether they're paying you electronically or not. This is now your process. It's not for you to assume their administrative burden. And I would be very upfront about that with your customers. But then over time, explaining to them that, look, the overhead costs that are being incurred for you to manage the physical processing of a check, the mail associated with that, the team members that might be, sorting and filing and pushing out through print and mail centers, the documentation, that's a cost. And so your ability to partner on the idea that we can deliver operational efficiencies for both of us, I think is going to be a significant communication that needs to be made to your customers to start to initiate that behavioral change. But this is also facilitated by technology. So you have to also understand what your technology is today, what you have and what you don't have, and where you're going to need to bridge that gap, which is where we start to see the emergence of a lot of middleware software. Sometimes ERPs don't always accommodate this experience. Many of us work with what I call a number of boundary systems, all of the ancillary systems that are interfaced with your ERP. So you sort of need a software that potentially aggregates all of this information. And, in the absence of spending another 10, 30, $50 million on implementing a high-end enterprise cloud-based ERP that does it all. And by the way, I've not found one that exists. You need to look to these tools in the marketplace that are really helping to bridge the gaps I made mention of.
Yeah, and then just a couple other things to hit on too. That kind of what I'm hearing is, just making it easier to pay, right? Just having the portal, that's going to speed up the time to get paid, right? Regardless of anything else, right? Regardless of financial distress or anything like that. The other piece that's really interesting for me, for portals, in some ways, the self-service aspect, what that does is it completely bypasses now the need for doing cash application, right? Because your customer is actually going in, matching that payment to an invoice for you and paying that invoice. And then that information is then being fed back to your ERP system and settled, right? Rather than having to get a separate payment at the bank, and now you have a team that's going in and whether they're dealing with a couple of remittance or really just dealing with those payments and having to match them to invoices, the portal, at least for a segment of your customers, could bypass that. And I think there's always going to be some segment where you may have to take bank payments directly to the bank, or you're going to be pushing invoices to AP portals, right? But being able to automate that as well. But for a large segment, that whole e-invoice link to a portal and then pay online, it's not only going to be a great experience for your customer, but it's going to help you to speed up your whole process internally. So we've got another poll question here, and so this is simple yes or no. Does your company offer an online portal where your customers can actually go in and pay their invoices?
What's interesting about this, Ryan, is what I've seen in our customer discussions is, a lot of our strategic accounts, so the very large clients that we're servicing, I would have never thought that they would want to adopt a portal experience, because they can dictate terms and they can, manage money, probably because they given the footprint that they have. But quite honestly, I think it comes down to, how do I create the operational efficiency to either repurpose resources, avoid costs, but also I think, it's also about a customer experience that they're becoming equally concerned about. So not surprising, a pretty low percentage at 16% responded yes, they have a portal, and the remainder was a no. I somewhat expected that. I think what I'm hearing now with clients of all sizes, small, medium, enterprise, strategic, is they're just starting to inquire as to what this digital experience could be for them, or what it could look like, and what type of undertaking it is. So I bet if we ask that question a year from now, I'd suspect the no's moving closer to yes in a sizable way. Speculating there, but I think that we're going to see that happen more over the next year.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think we're both having a lot of conversations about it. So you're seeing the interest there, at least from a lot of companies. So we'll touch on I think payments briefly. I'd like to spend a little bit of time kind of showing some things you could put into practice, and then also leave a little bit of time for Q&A. I think we've talked pretty well about the communication and the customer portal aspect. And then just in terms of flexibility in payment methods. Chris, anything you want to kind of add there as it relates to payments?
Well, you know what I'd like to do, and we've had, and I'm not ignoring the questions we've received. Some we'll answer live, but there was a question regarding, if this person's company does not accept credit cards, are they able to make other types of payments via e-invoice, ACH, wire? That's exactly right. That this to me is that extension of facilitating payment experience. So absolutely, Ryan will touch on a little more of the portal that we have available, but certainly a comprehensive portal it should really facilitate all of those payment types: credit card, ACH, the EFT payments, and the like. So the capability is out there, and so absolutely would encourage businesses looking to adopt a portal experience. Absolutely look to ensure that those other or more flexible payment methods can be facilitated through that portal experience.
Yeah, and even for, driving adoption, right? I mean, just driving adoption is great. I think a further benefit is if you could drive adoption not just on credit card, but really lead with ACH type of payments, because that's going to lower at the end of the day the cost of that payment. I mean, we all know the credit card rates that are out there, right? It's just kind of industry standard. ACH is going to be a typically less of a cost. The other benefit to these portals, which we didn't really touch on, is many times if you're taking credit card payments in sort of just a traditional way, or what I would say kind of disconnected to the invoice, you're not getting the benefit of maybe level 2 or even level 3 payments where you're going to be getting better rates on cards. So a lot of times with these portals, what you can do is, because you have the invoice information in there, you can send that through with the payment, and then you're going to end up getting improved rates even on the credit card payments. But for me, it's sort of step one, get the adoption. Step two, drive that adoption into maybe the lower cost payments, but then also even on the card payments, drive a lower cost there as well.
Hey, Ryan, just because we're on the topic, there's two other questions I'll quickly wanted to respond to. Look, accepting credit cards, yeah, obviously there's a PCI compliance requirement, and your ability to tokenize that information is significant. So, whether it's through your gateway processor, there's typically a means for tokenization. We are exploring alternatives to provide a token-like experience so that upon the initial entry of credit card information, it's just not available. I'd encourage anyone who's working with a gateway processor to speak with them about the ability to ensure that credit card information is protected. There's the PCI aspect, the PII aspect of that. We can certainly, if there are questions after the presentation, speak to some of the things that we've seen and can help facilitate. And then there was just a comment about online payments being made available by one company, but adoption was low, and so the online payment was canceled. Look, I think that's not an uncommon occurrence in that, if you're not getting the adoption, why should I continue to maintain a site and all of the associated overhead? But think about the portal experience, not only about the payment, think about the customer experience. Having a repository of invoices, account statements, the ability for that customer to communicate across the portal with customer service, maybe even allowing them to dispute or question charges or products. All of these things are meant to create the customer experience, but then also get to resolution as quickly as possible. Your ability to accept the payment is just a further extension of that experience, but I wouldn't just look at a portal simply for purposes of getting payment, because in the absence of that real adoption initiative, you're right, it's going to become difficult to just say, here's a portal, go make payment, thank you, have a nice day. It's got to be a bigger experience that has benefits beyond just payments, which are really meant to accelerate your cash, but rather create the experience that presents a self-service type experience, again, for lack of a better term, for your customers.
Yes, it's even just the convenience of being able to go in and, even as a buyer or someone who has to pay invoices, being able to go into a portal for some of the vendors I work with and actually just being able to see my invoices is tremendously useful, even if I'm not making the payment there, right? Even if the payment is done separately by the AP team.
Yeah, you know what, Ryan, there's one more question, and I think you and we deal with this a lot, and just because there's really good questions coming in, I don't want to miss the opportunity
Of
to answer.
course. Yeah.
But with regard to customer portals, look, I've been the recipient of pretty much mandates made by customers. You're going to use my Ariba portal. You need to enable on my Ariba network.
Mhm.
Coupa, Tungsten, OB10, Paymode X. Some of these have costs associated with them. This is exactly the issue that's coming up in the business world. It's the payables process of your customers is now that burden is being placed on you. So the way to get around that, one, and this could be a whole separate webinar, but there's a series of questions that you should be asking that customer, particularly if they're using a third-party platform that does have costs to the supplier associated with it. But those aside, this is where partnering with the right provider and leveraging technology, you can build the integrations to automate the PO flip process, the submission
Mhm.
of invoice data into these portals, the tracking of that, and some of you may be familiar with EDI file formats, other file type formats. All of this can be facilitated in an automated way. And so is there work up front? Absolutely, but it'll pay dividends on the back end because it eliminates the manual labor intensive work. It eliminates those heavy resource requirements to reconcile, research, and track. But if you identify the proper file formats, integrate and interface effectively, you can really generate a lot of efficiencies. And again, it's your experience and your customer's experience that will be enhanced. And here's the beauty of integrating with third-party portals. You become so ingrained in that customer's process.
Mhm.
Quite honestly, it becomes difficult to just then turn around and try to rip out the process. So it's probably an indirect benefit, but there is a benefit to ensuring that that relationship gets maintained over time.
Yeah, and there's, even even the experience from the team, right? We talk to a lot of customers who it's someone's job on the team, or maybe multiple people's job on the team to, for their larger customers, spend time logging into a portal, uploading invoices, doing a whole lot of manual processes inside the tool. And that's not their only job, right? They have their whole other set of tasks or activities they're having to do throughout the day. And this is another task that's now on their plate to go into these portals. And so, what Chris was highlighting, even just that EDI 810 or EDI 820 exchange back and forth between these portals could just remove a lot of that manual work. And then you're going to speed up as well the time it takes to get that information out to the portal rather than having a person have to, push that information manually. Um, so what I want to do now is just kind of highlight a few of the tools, kind of where you see these elements coming into play in practice. Um, so just quick hit on this. I mean, this is an example of um, being able to put out there, put an online credit application out there. And so I was able to create this, define the fields and define the forms, and then it's a link that I can either put as a button on my website that customers can go to apply for credit, or a link that I can put into an email that my customers can then fill out. Um, and then through this process, what my customer can do is they'll put in their information, and then right on this form, they're going to get an automatic response. And it's going to say, one of three things: either you're approved, and by approved, it's, you're approved, here's your terms, right? Is that going to be for net 30? Is there any discount? What's the actual limit? So you're able to show all of that through this digital onboarding experience. Or it may be, hey, we need to actually take a deeper look at this. So now you're in review, but then you can communicate back and forth through a digital process. Um, you know, or outright decline. I think we don't see too many outright declines. Usually it's either approve or some form of approval or a manual review, but that can all be done through an online digital process and dealing directly with the customer. And sitting behind this is a policy that I've defined, right? Whether that's for different market segments, but it's based upon the information that's being put in to the form, plus the information that I have in the database for my bureau. So that's one aspect on the online credit application. We've talked a lot about email, right, and adoption and digital reminders, and it's one thing to put that in place, but it's also important to think about, not only do you need to send the email, but you also need to ensure that it was actually delivered, open, read, right? How are you really tracking adoption? So one way to do that, I mean, a lot of tools out there today, they're going to have this ability to actually track deliverability, which might be a new metric that the team would be looking at. But um, having a tool in place to help do that at least allows you to be able to track those trends. Chris, anything you want to add just on the analytics and driving adoption?
Um, I mean, I think you hit on it. This is really, we want to be able to, track this information for the purpose of adoption. But then also there's an aspect of this that will help you also ensure that your customer data management or customer data is up to date. There had been a question early on. It's a good time to answer. A question on how are you getting emails through spam filters?
Right.
We're not necessarily getting emails through the spam filter, but leveraging our partnership and being able to quickly report when an email has hit a spam filter is how we resolve that quickly, so that upon notification, either through a bounced or a blocked or a failed to deliver, again, something that gets caught up in spam, we're able to identify immediately and then action against that. And that action is typically going back to the customer and asking, if there's a way to get beyond the firewall or whatever the issue may be. So that's really how we're addressing that issue in particular.
Yeah, and there's, it's also working, just being specific to us, right? The partner we work with is, a leading company in email deliverability. It's obvious, and so they have things like DKIM records, right? So all of the sort of best practice things that you do to white label and ensure deliverability through the tool. And then also when you're adopting a tool like this, these emails need to come from your email, right? They shouldn't be coming from some other random third party, whether that's an actual individual collector or through some shared email, but they're really coming from your domain out to the customer. The other piece too, just to track is deliverability, right? Or so if you're looking to put in, move from print and mail into e-delivery, or kind of check payments into more digital payments, it's being able to track those trends over time as well, and really understanding how you're performing and where there could be potential issues. So it's important to have a tool in place that allows you to be able to track that information. The last thing I'm going to share is this is just an example, just so you have a visual reference when we're talking about portals. This is what we're referring to. So in this example, once again, we use our classic D&B example company, Gourmet Manufacturing. So this is a gourmet manufacturing portal. Gourmet Manufacturing, when they send out an invoice, they include a link to the portal. So Future Generation, as you see at the top here, is the customer. They have their own portal account. So as Future Generation, I can go in here and I can see what's due, what might be past due, what my current balance is. I can even communicate back and forth through this tool. I can place an invoice potentially in dispute or make a payment for that invoice. So whether or not that's a credit card payment, like we talked about, ACH payment. So, having those different forms of payment in here as well, and being able to really even just view and download an invoice like we were discussing, or to be able to kind of see a history of the payments that I've sent through this platform. So this really gives me my singular view of that vendor relationship here. Chris, anything you want to add as it relates to this portal piece?
No, other than to reiterate what my point earlier, which is yes, payment is important, but it is about the customer experience. And as Ryan highlighted, retrieval of documentation, ability to communicate with the supplier or you as the supplier, and facilitating that self-serve experience. I think, for, again, not for every customer, because you do have a mix of risk within the portfolio, but certainly for the low moderate risk to the low overall risk with low dollar balances, it's a nice way to get them started on that digital journey with you. And I think adoption for that subset of customers is going to be easily manageable. But again, it's a matter of making it available.
Yeah, so there's a couple of questions that came in on Q&A. I know we've been doing Q&A kind of throughout the session. One of them I think we can answer pretty quick, so I'll just take that one, which is, so the portal that I was just showing, someone asked if that's something that DNB offers. So that is something that we actually do offer as a service in terms of, the actual software, helping customers get those portals set up and getting them integrated with the ERP systems. That is something that we do um, for customers. And someone asked, well, can a customer flag one or more? Yeah, within that tool, there's multi-select. So if they wanted to select multiple invoices or a single invoice for dispute, that can be done as well. There was a question about what tools you use for credit management. And Chris, do you want to take that one and answer it?
Yeah. So for me as a practitioner, quite honestly, it's I've been a heavy user of D&B. So I've at one point in my career, we leveraged ERAM because I was running a global finance operations organization. That's ERAM served. That's our enterprise risk assessment manager. It served as the engine that helped with the decision making. DNBI modules now with DNB Finance Analytics. So decision maker and account manager I've utilized, and more recently in my last two organizations, the online credit application. Now the OCA and decision maker, Ryan, just to clarify, they're one not one and the same. They are two different things, but you need just is am I correct in saying you need decision maker to leverage OCA?
Yes. So you think of, online credit application. I guess the way I think about it is this is the form, right? That's going to, that
Yep.
customers are going to fill out. Decision maker, that's where I go to create my actual policy. And my policy is going to be everything from the actual decision to the terms and to the credit limit. All that's going to live inside that policy. And it's going to be different potentially even for, different segments of my customer base. Someone also asked a question, and so kind of as part of that suite, do you have the ability to, let's say, maybe redecision that customer down the road? And the answer to that is yes as well, where you may want to set up even after that initial credit onboarding some sort of credit review down the road. Now, and we have some customers that are doing this, is you may want to have that as just real-time data driven. So if there's a bankruptcy or some major change to the risk, you're going to want to queue that up or review that. Others are setting it up as being periodic. So just run an annual review across my entire portfolio, or do it 1 year after this customer has been onboarded. So there's a number of different ways that you can design that account review process. Chris, question came in, a great question actually, around within the credit approval process, this need for actual compliance. And in this specific example, it's compliance with sanctions, um, specifically around terrorism activities. But, just the whole idea of what are we doing around compliance within the credit decisioning process?
Yeah, so within finance analytics, we now have a restricted party screening option, so that if you're decisioning, you can then extend that review to incorporate this restricted party screening. So to your point on sanctions listings and things of that nature, we're going to be also introducing some fraud analytics, and then ESG, environmental, social, and corporate governance analytics. So we are absolutely trying to remain at the forefront of these offerings and making them available through our finance analytics platform. Great question, because this is the marrying of what you typically find on the supplier and risk and compliance management side versus what we've historically seen in the credit decisioning function. But we recognize the need, and we are starting to bring those worlds together. So certainly encourage you to get with us offline if you want some more specifics around that RPS offering. But it's absolutely something that we are initiating, and there are options to address that need, to the question that was asked.
Yep, thank you, Chris. And then one last question I'll tackle, because I know we're actually like about a minute over, but I still see we've got a bunch of people online. So appreciate you all hanging with us. One question was about what common ERPs do we integrate with? And, typically varies by business side. I would say, in the mid-market segment, we'll typically see things like Infor SXE, especially in the manufacturing industry, Oracle NetSuite, Great Plains, Sage. In the kind of larger businesses, SAP is very common ERP system that we encounter, and then it's all different flavors. We're starting to see a little bit of the cloud SAP HANA, but typically it's all the other kind of flavors of SAP. Similarly with Oracle as well, so Oracle Cloud and Microsoft Dynamics. And so really these types of solutions, as Chris highlighted earlier, you're always going to be dealing with these various boundary systems. Could really integrate with anything, even from a homegrown to an AS400 system, whether that's file-based or API-based. So a lot of flexibility there when it comes to integration. So look, thanks everyone who's still hanging with us. Just want to be respectful of everyone's time. The recording of the session will actually be shared, as well as the presentation from today's session. And then if you have questions, you can contact your Dun Bradstreet account executives, or you can call our toll-free number as well. And we're happy to speak with you further. All right, thanks everyone. Have a great day.
Yep, thanks.